Fame is a dangerous game, and sometimes the price is your entire fortune. These artists gave us the heaviest riffs of all time, but the industry chewed them up. You will not believe which legendary frontman died, owing thousands of dollars after generating millions. The truth about the music business is darker than any song they ever wrote. 1. Cliff Burton from Metallica. It is impossible to talk about heavy metal history without mentioning the man who made the bass guitar sound like a lead instrument. Cliff Burton joined Metallica and changed everything. He was the musical genius behind their early sound. He taught the other members about melody and harmony. His work on the album Master of Puppets is considered some of the best music ever written. The band was on top of the world in 1986. They were touring Europe and getting bigger every single day. It seemed like Cliff was destined to be the richest and most famous bass player in history. But tragedy struck on a cold night in Sweden. The tour bus skidded on black ice and flipped over. Cliff was thrown from the bunk and the heavy vehicle landed on him. It was a sudden and heartbreaking end to a brilliant life. He was only 24 years old. You see, the sad part is that Metallica had not yet reached their peak financial success. They were popular, but they were not yet the multi-millionaires they are today. Cliff passed away right before the band exploded into the mainstream. After he was gone, the situation with his estate became complicated. While his family eventually received royalties, the early days were filled with confusion and sadness rather than wealth. He never got to enjoy the mansions and the luxury cars that his bandmates later bought. He lived for the music and died before the big payday arrived. It is a harsh reminder that talent does not always equal immediate fortune. But if you think dying before the money comes is tragic, wait until you hear about the man who created an entire genre of metal all by himself and died alone in an apartment. 2. Quorthon from Bathory. If you are a fan of Viking metal or black metal, then you owe everything to a Swedish musician named Thomas Forsberg, who went by the name Quorthon. He was the mastermind behind the band Bathory. In the early 80s, he created a sound that was raw, dark, and completely new. He recorded albums in a garage with cheap equipment, but the atmosphere he created was legendary. Bands all over the world cite him as their biggest influence. He was a true pioneer who shaped the sound of thousands of bands that came after him. Despite his massive influence, Quorthon was a very private person. He did not tour, and he did not do many interviews. He lived a quiet life in Stockholm. You might think the creator of a whole music genre would be wealthy, but that was not the case. Bathory was an underground band. They sold records to loyal fans, but they never had mainstream radio hits. Quorthon did everything himself, from writing the music to designing the album covers. He kept costs low because the income was not huge. In 2004, Quorthon passed away suddenly from heart failure. He was only 38 years old. He was found in his apartment, and it took a while for the news to even reach the public. He did not leave behind a massive fortune or a big estate. He lived simply and died simply. His legacy is worth millions in terms of cultural impact, but his bank account did not reflect that. He gave his life to his art without asking for riches in return. While Quorthon died quietly at home, our next star passed away in the most shocking place possible, right in front of his fans. 3. Mike Scaccia from Ministry. Mike Scaccia was a guitar wizard. He was best known for his work with the industrial metal band Ministry and the thrash band Rigor Mortis. He had a speed and precision that other guitar players could only dream of. When he joined Ministry in the late 80s, he helped them become one of the biggest industrial bands in the world. They played huge festivals like Lollapalooza and influenced countless other artists. Mike was a working musician who spent his life on the road and in the studio. He was dedicated to his craft and loved playing live more than anything. However, the life of a touring musician is expensive. You have to pay for travel, gear, and crew, and often there is not much left over for the artist. Mike Scaccia was not a millionaire living in luxury. He was a guy who had to keep playing to pay the bills. On a fateful night in 2012, he was playing a show in Texas to celebrate the birthday of his bandmate. He was doing what he loved most in the world. Suddenly, right in the middle of a song, he collapsed on stage. The crowd thought it might be part of the show at first, but it was real. He had suffered a massive heart attack. He was rushed to the hospital, but they could not save him. He was 47 years old. It turned out he had heart disease that had gone untreated. Like many musicians, he did not have great health insurance or a big savings account to pay for top-tier medical care. He died with debts from touring and left his family in a tough spot. But while Mike died doing what he loved, the next drummer on our list was kicked out of his own band and left with nothing but resentment. 4. Nick Menza from Megadeth. In the early 90s, there was no metal band tighter and more technical than Megadeth. The classic lineup featured a drummer named Nick Menza. He was a powerhouse behind the kit. He played on the album Rust in Peace, which many fans believe is the best thrash metal album ever made. Nick toured the world and played in front of millions of people. During that time, he was making good money and living the rock star life. He was a key part of the band's most successful era. But the music business is brutal. In 1998, Nick had to have surgery on his knee. While he was recovering, the band leader, Dave Mustaine, decided to let him go. Just like that, Nick was out of the band he helped build. Over the next decade, Nick tried to start other projects and even tried to rejoin Megadeth a few times, but it never worked out. The steady checks stopped coming. He found himself in a situation where the money from the glory days was drying up fast. By 2016, Nick was playing jazz fusion gigs in small clubs. He was far away from the arenas he used to sell out. During one of these small shows, he collapsed on stage, just like Mike Scaccia. It was heart failure again. He was 51. Reports after his passing revealed that he was not financially secure. He had been blacklisted by some in the industry and struggled to find steady, high-paying work. He went from the top of the world to worrying about bills. It is a scary thought, but not as scary as being one of the founders of heavy metal and ending up homeless, which is exactly what happened to our next legend. 5. Bill Ward from Black Sabbath. When you think of heavy metal, it all starts with Black Sabbath, and the heartbeat of Black Sabbath was Bill Ward. His drumming on songs like War Pigs and Iron Man is iconic. He helped invent the style of drumming that every metal band uses today. In the 70s, Black Sabbath was one of the biggest bands on the planet. They sold millions of records and lived a life of excess. You would assume that an original member of such a huge band would be set for life with millions in the bank. But Bill Ward had a very hard road. In the 80s, he struggled with severe personal battles with substances. His health deteriorated, and he was eventually pushed out of the band. During this low point, Bill Ward was actually homeless. He was living on the streets and sleeping in alleys while his songs were being played on the radio. It is a heartbreaking image. A legend who shaped music history was asking strangers for change. He eventually cleaned up his life and got healthy, which is a huge victory. But the financial battles continued. In recent years, when Black Sabbath did their massive reunion tours, Bill Ward was left out. He claimed it was because they offered him a contract that was unsignable. He said the pay they offered was insulting. As a result, he missed out on the giant payday that his bandmates Ozzy and Tony received. He is currently semi-retired, and while he is not on the streets anymore, he definitely did not get the fortune he deserved. If you think that is unfair, wait until you hear about the singer who lived in a warehouse and had to trade band merchandise for food. 6. Paul Bailoff from Exodus. The Bay Area in California was the birthplace of thrash metal, and Exodus was one of the first bands on the scene. Their original singer was a wild man named Paul Bailoff. He was famous for his crazy energy on stage. He would demand that the crowd hurt each other in the mosh pit. Their debut album, Bonded by Blood, is a classic. Paul was a cult hero in the metal community. He was the definition of a thrasher. He lived and breathed the lifestyle. However, being a cult hero does not pay the rent. Paul was not a songwriter in the way that brings in royalties. He was a frontman. After he was fired from the band in the late 80s, he drifted around. He did not have a backup plan or a career outside of metal. For years, he lived a nomadic lifestyle. People say he lived in warehouses and crashed on couches. He lived in squalor, sometimes trading old band shirts or memorabilia just to get by. He rejoined Exodus later in life, but the band was not playing stadiums. They were playing clubs. In 2002, Paul suffered a massive stroke. He was taken to the hospital, but he was brain dead. The doctors had to make the tough choice to let him go. He was 41. He died with almost no assets. His wealth was his reputation among the fans who loved him. He was a true metal soldier who sacrificed everything for the music. Speaking of sacrificing everything, our next artist was a musical genius who passed away before his masterpiece could be shared with the world. 7. The Rev from Avenged Sevenfold. Jimmy Sullivan, known to the world as The Rev, was more than just a drummer for Avenged Sevenfold. He was a main songwriter, a vocalist, and the creative soul of the band. He had a unique style that blended metal with punk and even circus music. The band was climbing the charts and becoming the new kings of modern metal. The Rev was young and talented and had his whole life ahead of him. But in 2009, the Rev passed away. It was ruled as an accidental interaction of different prescription medications and alcohol combined with an enlarged heart. He was only 28 years old. The tragedy here is not just the loss of life, but the timing. He died right before the band released their biggest album, Nightmare. That album went to #1 and made the band huge superstars who played arenas around the globe. Because he passed away so young and before that massive success, he did not have a huge fortune built up. Young musicians often put all their money back into the band. They pay for buses, videos, and studio time. The Rev left behind a legacy of amazing songs, but his estate was not what it would have been if he had lived just a few more years. He planted the seeds for the band's success, but never got to harvest the rewards. And sadly, sometimes the danger comes from the fans themselves, which is the horrific story of our next guitar hero. 8. Dimebag Darrell from Pantera. Dimebag Darrell Abbott is considered one of the greatest guitar players to ever walk the earth. With his brother Vinnie Paul, he formed Pantera and saved metal in the 90s. His riffs were heavy and groovy, and his solos were soulful. Pantera sold millions of albums, and Dimebag was a hero to kids everywhere. He was known for being the nicest guy in the business, always giving fans a drink or a guitar pick. After Pantera broke up, he started a new band called Damage Plan. On December 8, 2004, Damage Plan was playing a small club in Columbus, Ohio. It was just another stop on the tour. But a deranged fan climbed onto the stage. He was angry about the breakup of Pantera. He took Dimebag's life right there on stage. It was one of the darkest days in music history. Dimebag was only 38. While Pantera had made money, the end of the band had been messy with lawsuits and arguments. When he passed away, his estate became a subject of legal battles. There were fights over music rights and catalog values. Dimebag was generous to a fault, often giving away his money and gear to friends. He was not a hoarder of wealth. While he was not broke in the sense of being homeless, his liquidity was tied up in the business of music. He left behind a legacy that is priceless, but the way his life ended left financial chaos for those left behind. The stress of the music industry can also lead to bad health choices, which is what took down the man with the tallest hair in metal. 9. Wayne Static from Static X. If you watched MTV in the late 90s, you saw Wayne Static. He was the singer and guitarist for Static X, and he had hair that stood straight up in a giant tower. Their song Push It was a huge hit. They called their style Evil Disco. Wayne was the face of the band, and for a while, they were everywhere. They played Ozfest and had songs in movies. It seemed like Wayne was living the good life in Hollywood. But as the years went on, the popularity of nu metal faded. The band had internal fights and broke up. Wayne tried to keep the name going with solo projects, but it was a struggle. He got into legal battles with his former bass player over the rights to the band name, which drained a lot of his money. On top of that, he struggled with dependency on prescription medication. In 2014, Wayne passed away in his sleep. It was a mix of strong liquid and medication that caused his system to shut down. He was 48. After he passed, it was revealed that he was facing serious financial trouble. The lawsuits and the lack of big tours had taken a toll. His wife passed away shortly after him, also struggling with similar issues. It was a tragic end for a couple who had once been the royalty of the industrial metal scene. Sometimes the cost of the show itself is what bankrupts the artist, which is the story of our next monster. 10. Oderus Urungus from Gwar. Gwar is not just a band, it is a spectacle. They are famous for dressing up as interplanetary barbarian monsters and spraying the audience with fake alien fluids. The leader of this chaotic circus was Dave Brockie, who played the character Oderus Urungus. For 30 years, he led the band through constant touring and controversy. He was a brilliant satirist and a creative genius who built all the props and costumes himself. But putting on a Gwar show is incredibly expensive. The costumes cost thousands of dollars to make and maintain. The fluids and the cleanup fees at venues eat up most of the profit. Dave Brockie was not a rich man. He lived in a roomings house in Richmond, Virginia, with other artists. He poured every cent he made back into the band to make the show bigger and crazier. He cared more about the art than the bank account. In 2014, Dave was found unresponsive in his chair, still wearing his socks. He had passed away from an accidental situation involving substances. He was 50. After 30 years of leading a world-famous band, he had almost no savings. His bandmates had to set up a foundation to preserve his art. He died a working-class artist who sacrificed his financial security to entertain the weirdos of the world. But at least music was his main job. Our next star had to fight fires just to put food on the table. 11. Bill Tolley from Internal Bleeding. Internal Bleeding is a legendary band in the underground death metal scene. They are known for inventing the slam riff, which is a huge part of modern heavy music. Their drummer, Bill Tolley, was a beast behind the kit. He toured Europe and the United States and had fans all over the globe. But death metal is a niche genre. It does not pay the bills for a family in New York City. So Bill had a day job, and it was not just any job. He was a firefighter with the FDNY. He was a hero who ran into burning buildings to save lives. He balanced his life between playing brutal metal and serving his community. He was a man of service and passion. He did not do it for the money. He did it because he loved it. In 2017, tragedy struck. But it was not on tour. Bill was fighting a fire in Queens. He fell from the roof of a building and lost his life in the line of duty. He was 42. He left behind a wife and a young daughter. While the fire department took care of his pension, he did not have a rock star fortune. He was a blue-collar guy who happened to be a metal legend. His story reminds us that many of your favorite musicians are working regular jobs just to survive. But sometimes you cannot work at all, which brings us to the most heartbreaking story on this list. 12. Jason Becker. In the late 80s, Jason Becker was the future of guitar playing. He was a neoclassical prodigy who could play faster and cleaner than anyone else. He joined David Lee Roth's band, replacing Steve Vai. This was one of the biggest gigs in the world. Jason was only 20 years old and he was about to become a superstar. He was featured on magazine covers and was recording a major album. Then he felt a pain in his leg. It was a condition called ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. The doctors told him he had 3 years to live. He lost the ability to walk, then the ability to move his arms, and finally the ability to speak. He lost the gig with David Lee Roth because he could no longer play. His career was over before it truly began. But Jason did not die in 3 years. He is still alive today, decades later. However, he is completely paralyzed. He communicates by moving his eyes to spell out words. Because he requires 24-hour care, the medical bills are astronomical. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just to keep him alive. He relies on fundraisers and donations from fans to pay for his care. The man who should have been a millionaire guitar god is dependent on the kindness of strangers. It is a cruel twist of fate. And speaking of health destroying a career, our next star was the best guitar player in Europe until his lifestyle caught up with him. 13. Alexi Laiho from Children of Bodom. Alexi Laiho was a wild child from Finland. He formed the band Children of Bodom and took the world by storm. He was voted the best metal guitarist in the world by magazines multiple times. He combined classical music with harsh vocals and catchy melodies. He was the face of a new generation of guitar heroes. He lived fast and partied hard. He was known as the Wild Child, but the rock and roll lifestyle has a price. Years of heavy drinking began to destroy his body. His liver and pancreas were failing. He tried to get sober, but the damage was done. In his final years, he could not play as well as he used to. The band broke up and he formed a new version called Bodom After Midnight, but he was running out of time. He passed away in late 2020 at the age of 41. The cause was degeneration of the liver and pancreas due to alcohol. To make matters worse, his final years were filled with legal drama. He was technically still married to a former partner, which froze his assets and caused chaos for his actual family. He died without access to the money he had earned. It was a sad, messy end for a guy who once ruled the guitar world. But sometimes even being in a huge band like Slipknot does not guarantee a happy ending. 14. Paul Gray from Slipknot is a machine. They are one of the biggest metal bands of the last 20 years. They wear masks and jumpsuits and play intense, chaotic music. Paul Gray was the bass player and one of the founding members. He was known as the Pig because of his mask. He was also one of the main songwriters. He wrote many of the riffs that made the band famous. You would think that a key writer in Slipknot would be set for life, but Paul struggled with deep personal issues. He had a long battle with substances that he tried to hide from the world. In 2010, he was found in a hotel room in Iowa. He had passed away from an accidental toxicity. He was 38, and his wife was pregnant with their first child. After he died, it was revealed that his financial situation was not as secure as people thought. There were disputes over royalties and the band's business structure. His estate had to fight to get what was owed to his daughter. It showed that even in a massive corporate band, individual members can struggle if they do not have their personal lives in order. It is a tragic reminder that money cannot cure inner pain. This is something our next songwriter knew all too well. 15. Johnny Lane. From Warrant, Johnny Lane was the blonde bombshell singer of the band Warrant. He wrote the song Cherry Pie, which was a massive hit on MTV. You could not turn on the TV in 1990 without seeing his face. He was the poster boy for glam metal. He made millions for his record label, but ironically, he hated that song. He wanted to be a serious songwriter, but he was known as the Cherry Pie Guy. When grunge music took over in the 90s, Johnny's career tanked. The phone stopped ringing. He fell into a deep depression and turned to alcohol to cope. He lost his fortune through bad deals and expensive habits. He spent years trying to tour in small clubs, often forgetting the words to his own songs. In 2011, Johnny was found in a comfort inn in California. He had passed away from acute alcohol poisoning. He was 47. He had a note in his pocket with a phone number. He was alone and far from the glamour of his early days. He died with very little money left. The industry that chewed him up had spit him out. It is a classic Hollywood tragedy. And sadly, bad bridges burned in the past can haunt you forever, as our next singer found out. 16. Kevin DuBrow from Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot was the first heavy metal band to have a #1 album on the Billboard charts. Their album, Metal Health, knocked Michael Jackson off the top spot. Their singer, Kevin DuBrow, was a loudmouth with a big voice. He was famous for bragging and insulting other bands in the press. He thought he was invincible, but when the band's popularity dipped, his bad attitude came back to bite him. He burned so many bridges that nobody wanted to work with him. He was fired from his own band. He spent years trying to get back on top, but he never reached those heights again. He lived in Las Vegas and tried to keep the band going on the nostalgia circuit. But the big money was gone. In 2007, Kevin was found in his home. He had been gone for several days before anyone found him. It was an accidental situation with forbidden substances. He was 52. He died alone, and while he had a house, he was not the wealthy rock star he once was. His fame had faded, and so had his fortune. But at least he had a hit record. Our next artist helped invent punk rock, but died before the world gave him credit. 17. Rob Tyner from MC5. The MC5 were a band from Detroit in the late 60s. They were loud, political, and angry. They are considered the grandfathers of punk and metal. Their singer, Rob Tyner, had a giant afro and a powerful voice. Their song, Kick Out the Jams, is a legendary anthem. But back then, they were considered too dangerous for radio. They were dropped by labels and censored. Rob Tyner quit the music business in the 70s because he was broke. He focused on raising his family and doing local community work. He did not see a dime from the merchandise and records that influenced bands like Rage Against the Machine. He lived a modest working-class life in Michigan. In 1991, he suffered a heart attack while sitting in his parked car. He was 58. He left his family with very little. It was only after he died that people started to realize how important he was. His wife had to fight for years to get royalties from the record companies. He was a visionary who died waiting for the world to catch up. And speaking of visionaries, our next artist invented shock rock, but died without a penny. 18. Screamin' Jay Hawkins. Before Alice Cooper or Marilyn Manson, there was Screamin' Jay Hawkins. He was a blues singer who brought coffins and skulls on stage. His song, I Put a Spell on You, is a classic. He was a wild character who claimed to have 57 children. He was a true original who paved the way for theatrical metal. But Jay was terrible with money. He trusted the wrong people and signed bad contracts. He also had a gambling problem and loved women, which is an expensive combination. Despite his song being covered by hundreds of artists, he saw very little of that money. He spent his later years living in Europe trying to make ends meet. He passed away in Paris in 2000 after surgery. He was 70. He was destitute. He had almost nothing left. His body was actually left in the morgue for weeks because no one came to claim him. It was a sad end for a man who brought so much magic to the stage. It goes to show that being a legend does not pay the rent, and neither does selling millions of t-shirts, which is the irony of our next punk icon. 19. Joey Ramone from the Ramones. The Ramones are the most famous punk band in history. Their logo is on t-shirts at every mall in America. You see kids wearing Ramones shirts who have never heard a Ramones song. Joey Ramone was the tall, lanky singer with the hair covering his face. He was the voice of the Outcasts. The Ramones toured constantly for 22 years without a break. But here is the kicker. The Ramones never had a hit record. They never sold millions of albums while they were together. They played clubs and small theaters. They made a living, but they were not rich. The band members also hated each other, which made life miserable. Joey lived in a regular apartment in New York City. Joey passed away from lymphoma in 2001. He was 49. It was only after he died that the merchandise sales really took off. He missed out on the massive wave of nostalgia that made the Ramones brand worth millions. He died a punk rocker with a modest bank account, while corporations made a fortune off his name. And finally, we have a young star whose need for speed cost him everything. 20. Mitch Lucker from S. Silence. Mitch Lucker was the charismatic frontman for the deathcore band S. Silence. He was covered in tattoos and had a scream that could shatter glass. The band was huge with the younger generation. Mitch was famous for his stage move called the Lucker Stomp. He was a rising star in the modern metal scene and had a young daughter he adored. But Mitch had a dangerous hobby. He loved fast motorcycles. On Halloween night in 2012, he got into an argument with his wife. He was upset and had been drinking. He got on his motorcycle and sped off into the night. He lost control and crashed. He passed away from his injuries the next morning. He was only 28. Because he was so young, he had not built up a life insurance policy or a big savings account. The band had to hold a memorial concert just to raise money for his daughter's education. It was a tragic waste of a young life. He had the world at his feet, but one bad decision took it all away, leaving his family to pick up the pieces. Rob Halford of Judas Priest. Anyone who knows heavy metal knows the name Rob Halford. He is the lead singer of Judas Priest, one of the biggest and most important metal bands ever. They call him the Metal God, and for good reason. His powerful, screaming voice and his style, all leather and studs, basically created the look of heavy metal in the late 1970s and early 80s. Songs like Breaking the Law and You've Got Another Thing Comin' are classic anthems that everyone knows. For decades, Halford was the ultimate picture of a metal frontman. But here is the real story. For all those years at the top, Rob was hiding a huge part of himself from the public. He was a gay man in a genre that, at the time, was not always accepting. He worried that if the fans knew, it would be the end of Judas Priest. So he kept his personal life very private. Then, in 1998, during an interview on MTV, he just decided to tell the world. He casually mentioned that he was a gay man and the interviewer was so surprised he did not even know what to say. Halford later said he felt a huge weight lift off his shoulders. The best part of the story is that the metal community, for the most part, did not care. They already loved him as the metal god. And that was that. It is amazing to think that one of the toughest-looking guys in music history was also a trailblazer for acceptance. But if you think coming out in traditional metal was a big deal, imagine doing it in the dark and scary world of Norwegian black metal. 2. Gall of Gorgoroth. Let's travel to the cold, dark forests of Norway, the birthplace of black metal. This style of music is known for being extreme, with fast drumming, screaming vocals, and spooky themes. One of the most famous and mysterious figures from this scene is a man named Gall. He was the singer for the band Gorgoroth, and he had a reputation for being one of the most intense and intimidating frontmen around. His stage presence was legendary. He would stand perfectly still, staring at the crowd with a chilling look in his eyes. He was the picture of scary, dark metal. So you can imagine the shock when, in 2008, Gall publicly announced that he was gay. It was for a metal magazine in Germany. The news sent ripples through the entire metal world. Black metal was seen as a very conservative and aggressive scene. So, for one of its biggest names to come out was a huge moment. People did not know what to think. Some in the scene were not happy, but many more were impressed by his courage. Gall, in his typical fashion, did not seem to care what anyone thought. He was just being himself. The story gets even more interesting. He revealed that his partner was a famous fashion designer. It was a detail that was so unexpected, it was almost funny. The scariest man in black metal was in a happy relationship, breaking every stereotype you could imagine. Gall showed that you can be true to yourself no matter what kind of music you make or what people expect from you. From the darkest corners of black metal, our next story takes us to the super technical world of a band that changed music forever, where not one but two members decided to share their truth together. Paul Masvidal of S. Inc. If you are a fan of really complex and brainy metal, you have probably heard of the band S. Inc. They were not your average band. They mixed heavy metal with jazz and other complicated styles to create a sound that was totally new and different. The leader of the band, a guitarist and singer named Paul Masvidal, was considered a genius. He even played on the legendary album Human by the band Death, which is one of the most important death metal albums ever made. Paul was a quiet, artistic guy who let his incredible guitar playing do the talking. For years, Paul and his bandmate, the drummer Sean Reinert, kept their personal lives very, very private. They were making music that was ahead of its time, and they focused all their energy on that. Fans respected them as amazing musicians, but no one really knew much about them as people. The band took a long break for many years, and when they finally came back, they had a new sense of purpose, and with that came a new sense of openness. Then, in 2014, in a big magazine article, Paul decided to tell the world that he was gay. He had known since he was young, but he had never felt comfortable sharing it with the public. He was worried about how people in the often tough metal scene would react, but he was tired of hiding. He said he wanted to be honest with himself and with his fans. He felt it was an important step, not just for him, but for the whole community. Sharing such a personal secret is a huge step for anyone, but Paul did not do it alone. He had the support of his best friend and bandmate, who was right there beside him. 4. Sean Reinert of S. Inc. Sean Reinert was the other half of the creative core of S. Inc. He was the band's drummer, and he was not just any drummer. He was a revolutionary. His style was unlike anything anyone had heard before. He played with the power of a metal drummer, but with the grace and complexity of a jazz master. Just like Paul Masvidal, he played on that classic Death album, Human. Together, Paul and Sean were a musical team that pushed the limits of heavy music. They grew up together, learned music together, and formed their band together. Because they were so close, it only made sense that they would take this next big step in their lives together. In that same magazine article in 2014, when Paul came out, Sean Reinert also announced that he was gay. It was a landmark moment for heavy metal. Two members of the same beloved and respected band coming out at the same time. They explained that they had grown up in a time and place where it was not safe to be open about who you were. They were afraid of being rejected by their families and by the music scene they loved. Their story was so powerful because it was about friendship as much as it was about identity. They had supported each other in private for decades, and now they were supporting each other in public. Sadly, Sean Reinert passed away in 2020, which was a huge loss for the music world. But his legacy as a groundbreaking drummer and a brave human being lives on. He and Paul showed everyone that metal is for all kinds of people. Coming out with your bandmate is one thing. But what about a lead singer who went through an even bigger personal journey, changing their whole identity in the public eye? 5. Me Na Ka Pu To of Life of Agony. In the 1990s, a band called Life of Agony came out of the New York hardcore and metal scene. They had a unique sound that was heavy and aggressive, but also full of emotion and melody. The voice of that band was a singer who, at the time, was known as Keith Caputo. The singer had a powerful, deep voice and a commanding stage presence. The band's songs often dealt with feelings of pain and confusion, and they connected with a lot of fans who felt like outsiders. For many years, the singer privately struggled with their identity. They felt that they were not living as their true self. It was a difficult and confusing time, filled with a lot of soul-searching. This struggle was happening while the band was becoming more and more famous, which made everything even more complicated. The pressure of being in the public eye while dealing with such a personal journey was immense. Finally, the singer knew they had to make a change to be happy. In 2011, the singer bravely announced to the world that she was transgender and would from now on be living as a woman named Me Na Ka Pu To. It was a powerful moment of honesty. She explained that she had felt this way her whole life and that it was time to finally be who she was meant to be. The band's fans, who had always connected with the honesty in her lyrics, were incredibly supportive. Me Na continued to front Life of Agony with a new sense of freedom and power, her voice as strong as ever. Her story is an inspiration, showing incredible courage. But she was not the first musician in a major heavy band to be open about their identity. Our next star was talking about it way back in the early 90s. 6. Roddy Bot Tum of Faith No More. Faith No More was one of the most creative and weird bands of the late 80s and 90s. You could not put them in a box. They mixed heavy metal with funk, hip-hop, and piano music. Their biggest hit, Epic, was all over the radio and MTV. One of the key members of the band was the keyboard player, Roddy Bot Tum. He was responsible for a lot of the band's unique sound, adding cool melodies and textures that made them stand out from all the other rock bands. Roddy was not just creative with his music. He was also way ahead of his time when it came to being open about his life. Back in 1993, a time when very few mainstream rock stars were out, Roddy gave an interview where he spoke openly and calmly about being gay. It was not a big, dramatic announcement. He just talked about it like it was a normal part of his life, because for him, it was. At the time, this was a really big deal. The music world, especially the hard rock and metal parts of it, was still seen as a tough guy's club. His bandmates in Faith No More were totally supportive. The lead singer, Mike Patton, even said in interviews that he was proud of Roddy. By being so open and casual about it, Roddy helped to make the rock world a more accepting place. He showed that your personal life has nothing to do with how well you can rock out on stage. He paved the way for many other artists to feel comfortable being themselves. Roddy was a pioneer in alternative metal. But in the world of nu metal, a style that came a bit later, our next artist was a powerful voice for a new generation. 7. Otep Shamaya of Otep. As the 90s turned into the 2000s, a new style of metal called nu metal became hugely popular. One of the most intense and outspoken bands from that era was named Otep, led by a powerhouse vocalist named Otep Shamaya. She was a force of nature. Her vocal style was incredible. She could go from a soft, poetic whisper to a deep, guttural roar in a split second. The band's music was aggressive and political, and they quickly gained a loyal following. From the very beginning of her career, Otep has been an out and proud lesbian. She has never hidden who she is. In fact, she uses her music and her platform to speak out for what she believes in. She writes songs about justice, equality, and personal freedom. For many young fans who felt different or unheard, she was a hero. Here was this incredibly strong and talented woman on stage, screaming her heart out and being completely, unapologetically herself. She has talked in interviews about how important it is for people to see representation in music. She wanted to be the kind of role model she did not have when she was growing up. In the world of heavy metal, which can sometimes feel like it is dominated by men, Otep stood out as a powerful female and lesbian voice. She is not just a musician, she is an activist, a poet, and a true original who has never been afraid to speak her mind. Otep has always been open about her life, but our next musician took a much longer and more complicated path to sharing his own truth after decades in a beloved and unique band. 8. Doug Pinnick of King's X. There are some bands that are true musicians' bands. They might not be the most famous in the world, but other musicians know how special they are. King's X is one of those bands. They have a sound that is a soulful mix of heavy rock, gospel harmonies, and progressive metal. At the center of that sound is the bassist and lead singer, Doug Pinnick. He has one of the most amazing and soulful voices in all of rock music, and his bass playing is legendary. For many years, King's X was also known as a Christian rock band, or at least a band with strong spiritual themes. This made Doug's personal journey very complicated. He grew up in a religious family and was part of a community where being gay was not accepted. He felt like he had to hide his true self for his entire life. He was a rock star in a spiritual band, and he was carrying this huge secret that he thought would make his fans and his community turn away from him. Finally, in 1998, the same year as Rob Halford, Doug decided he could not hide anymore. In an interview, he came out as gay. It was a decision that had a huge impact on his life and his career. Some people in the Christian music world did turn their backs on him, which was very painful. But he also found a new sense of freedom and honesty. He said that he felt like he could finally be the person he was always meant to be. Since then, he has continued to make amazing music with King's X and other projects, his voice as powerful as ever. Doug's journey was long and difficult. Our next star is from a newer generation, but she is also a powerful voice who is open about who she loves. 9. Lizzie Hale of Hailstorm. If you have listened to rock radio in the last 10 or 15 years, you have definitely heard the powerful voice of Lizzie Hale. She is the front woman for the modern hard rock and metal band Hailstorm. She is an incredible singer with a huge vocal range, and she is also a fantastic guitarist. Hailstorm has won a Grammy Award and has toured all over the world, becoming one of the biggest bands in modern rock. Lizzie is a role model for a whole new generation of rock fans. Lizzie has always been very open with her fans, not just about her music, but about her life. She is known for being very positive and empowering. In 2014, a fan asked her on her social media account if she was bisexual. Lizzie's response was simple and direct. She just said, "I am," and talked about how she believes that everyone should be free to love who they love without being judged. It was a straightforward and honest moment that her fans really appreciated. She is in a long-term relationship with one of her bandmates, the guitarist Joe Hottinger, but she has been clear that she is attracted to people of any gender. She often writes lyrics about love, passion, and being a strong, independent person. By being so open and comfortable with who she is, she sends a powerful message to her audience. She shows that you can be a total rock star, front a huge band, and be true to your heart all at the same time. Lucy Hale is a huge star today, but let's go back to the 90s to a musician from a much heavier, more underground scene who was also living his truth. 10. Till Lindemann of Rammstein. Get ready for some fire, because our next star is the lead singer of the German industrial metal band Rammstein. Till Lindemann is one of the most captivating frontmen in the world. His band is famous for its massive stage shows, which include explosions, flamethrowers, and all sorts of crazy theatrics. Till himself has a deep, booming voice and an incredibly powerful stage presence. He is a poet and a performer who is not afraid to explore dark and controversial ideas in his music. Rammstein's whole style is about pushing boundaries and challenging people's expectations. They play with imagery and ideas in a way that is very theatrical and sometimes shocking. Because of this, fans have often wondered about the personal lives of the band members. Till, in particular, has always had a very mysterious air about him. For a long time, people have speculated about his personal life and who he is off stage. In several interviews over the years, Till has stated that he is bisexual. He has talked about it in a very matter-of-fact way, without making a big deal out of it. It fits perfectly with his artistic personality. He is someone who does not seem to believe in strict rules or labels, either in his art or in his life. He is attracted to people's energy and spirit. This openness has made him an icon for many fans who feel like they do not fit into neat little boxes. He proves that the most powerful art often comes from a place of complete freedom. Till is known for his over-the-top performances. Our next artist is also a showman, but he does it all with a guitar and without ever singing a single word. 11. Angel Vivaldi. In the world of heavy metal, there is a special place for guitar heroes, the players who are so incredibly skilled that they become famous on their own. Angel Vivaldi is one of the brightest stars in the new generation of guitar virtuosos. He makes instrumental music, meaning there are no vocals. His guitar does all the talking, or rather, all the singing. His songs are beautiful, melodic, and incredibly technical. He can play with mind-bending speed, but he always focuses on writing a great song. Angel is also known for his amazing music videos and his positive, uplifting personality. From the very start of his career, he has been openly gay. He has never made it a secret, and he has built his entire career on being his authentic self. He has said in interviews that he did not want to build a fan base only to have to come out later. He wanted his fans to know who he was from day one. He wanted his music and his talent to speak for itself, and it absolutely has. He has become a huge inspiration, especially for young LGBTQ people who love heavy metal. He shows them that there is a place for them in this community. Angel often talks about the importance of love. Oh no, but so love, positivity, and self-acceptance. His message is that you should be proud of who you are and share your gifts with the world. He is living proof that you can be a total guitar wizard and a positive role model at the same time. Angel Vivaldi built his career on being open from the start. Our next artist was a flamboyant and mysterious figure from the early 2000s who also put his identity at the front of his art. 12 Owing. In the late 90s and early 2000s, during the height of the nu metal and industrial boom, there was a band called Owing. The band was named after its lead singer, a truly unique and artistic performer. Owing had a very dramatic and glamorous look, often wearing makeup and elaborate outfits. The band's music was a heavy mix of industrial sounds, metal riffs, and emotional lyrics. They stood out because they were so different from a lot of the other bands at the time. Owing, the singer, was openly gay and made his identity a central part of his artistic expression. He was a very visual artist who created a whole world around his music. he was not afraid to challenge the traditional tough guy image of a metal frontman. He was theatrical and vulnerable, and his lyrics often dealt with feelings of being an outsider, which resonated with many fans. He was a true original who was blazing his own path in the heavy music world. Tragically, Owing's life and career were cut short. He passed away in 2005, but his music and his legacy continue to inspire people. He was an artist who was ahead of his time in many ways. He showed that metal could be glamorous, emotional, and open about different kinds of life experiences. He was a unique voice who is still remembered by his dedicated fans for his courage and his art. Owing was a unique frontman in the industrial metal scene. Let's travel to an even more intense corner of music, the world of hardcore, to find our next artist. 13. Janis Zangir of Bloodlet. The line between hardcore punk and heavy metal has always been a bit blurry. In the 1990s, a new style called metalcore popped up, and one of the most creative bands in that scene was a group from Florida called Bloodlet. They had a really intense and chaotic sound. At the heart of that sound was their bass player, Janis Zangir. He was a key part of the band's powerful rhythm section. Bloodlet was a band that was respected in the underground scene for their creativity and their powerful live shows. Like many musicians in niche genres, Janis was not a household name, but his work was influential to other musicians. For a long time, his personal life was just that, personal. He was focused on the music and the art he was creating. Later in his life, Janis made the decision to live more openly as a gay man. For fans of that underground 90s scene, it was a cool moment. It was another example of how the heavy music world was more diverse than many people thought. It also showed that you do not have to be the lead singer or the most famous member of a band to be a role model. Just by being himself, Janis helped to break down stereotypes about who plays heavy, aggressive music. Janis was part of a powerful rhythm section. Believe it or not, our next artist was the bassist for the band Owing, and he came out alongside his famous bandmates. 14. Jason Todd Sergey of Owing. When we talked about Paul Masvidal and Sean Reinert of the band Owing, we mentioned their groundbreaking decision to come out together in 2014. But they were not the only members of the Owing family to be part of that story. For their big reunion tour, they had a new bassist on stage with them. His name was Jason Todd Sergey. He was an incredible musician who was able to handle the band's super complex and challenging music. Jason was a perfect fit for the band, not just musically, but personally too. When Paul and Sean decided to share their stories with the world, Jason was right there with them. You see, he was also a gay man. It was an amazing and probably historic moment. Here was this incredible band, known for its musical genius, and 3 of its members were openly gay. It was a powerful statement about acceptance and diversity in the metal community. Having 3 members of the band be open about their identity created a safe and supportive space for them and for their fans. Jason's part in this story is important because it shows the power of community. It was not just one person's journey, but a shared experience. He, along with Paul and Sean, helped to redefine what a heavy metal band could look like. They were just a group of amazing musicians making incredible art, and they were being true to who they were. The members of Owing changed progressive metal. Our next musician came from an earlier era, but his music would go on to influence thousands of metal bands. 15. Bob Mould of Husker Du. Let's take a little step back to the 1980s, to the world of underground punk rock. There was a band called Husker Du that was changing everything. They played with the speed and anger of punk, but they also wrote amazing, catchy melodies. Their sound would go on to be a huge influence on the alternative rock and grunge scenes of the 90s, as well as on many metal bands who loved their heavy guitar riffs. The leader of that band was a guitarist and singer named Bob Mould. Bob was a trailblazer. In the early 90s, after Husker Du had broken up and he had started a new band called Sugar, he decided to publicly come out as gay. This was a really brave thing to do at the time. The punk and alternative scenes were more open-minded than many other genres, but it was still rare for a major artist to be so open about their personal life. Bob did not want to hide who he was, and he felt it was important to be honest. His coming out did not slow down his career at all. He continued to be one of the most respected figures in independent music. Many metal musicians have cited his guitar playing and his emotional songwriting as a major inspiration. By being a successful out musician, he showed a whole generation of artists that it was possible to be true to yourself and still have a career in heavy music. He was a punk rock pioneer who helped pave the way for a more open-minded rock and roll world. Bob Mould influenced the metal world from the outside. Our next artist was the drummer for a huge popular metalcore band of the 2016, Pat Rick Keniff of All That Remains. In the mid-2000s, a wave of American metal bands took over the scene. This movement was often called the new wave of American heavy metal. One of the biggest bands from that time was All That Remains. They mixed heavy, thrashing riffs with melodic, singing choruses, and they became very popular. The man behind the drum kit, driving their powerful sound for many years, was Pat Rick Keniff. For the years that he was in the band, from 2003 until he decided to leave, Pat Rick was known as a solid and talented drummer. He was a key part of the band's success during their biggest year. From quiet warnings to struggles, the truth changes everything we thought we knew. Join us as we reveal the full story. Final bow, sudden silence. What happened after Ozzy's last show? When fans around the world watched Ozzy Osbourne's last concert at Birmingham's Villa Park on the 5th of July, no one imagined it would be his final goodbye forever. The show, titled Back to the Beginning, felt like a full-circle moment, a heavy, emotional return to the very place where his journey first began. He sat on a black throne singing his biggest hits like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley. Behind every lyric, there was a deeper meaning. The fans in the stadium, along with almost 6 million people watching online, clapped and cried. Ozzy smiled, waved, and pulled funny faces. But some saw something different. Exhaustion, pain, a strange quiet behind those wild eyes. "You have no idea how I feel," Ozzy said to the crowd. "Thank you from the bottom of my heart." The roar that followed shook the stadium. What no one knew then was that the man known as the Prince of Darkness had sung his final song. Less than 3 weeks later, on the morning of Tuesday, July 23rd, the world learned that Ozzy Osbourne had passed on. He was 76. The news came suddenly and with few details. There was no exact cause of his demise released right away, but many remembered his long struggle with Parkinson's disease, a battle he had spoken about with rare honesty. A statement posted to Ozzy's Instagram broke the hearts of millions. It is with more sadness than mere words can convey that we have to report that our beloved Ozzy Osbourne has passed away this morning. He was with his family and surrounded by love. The words were heavy, simple, and final. For years, Ozzy had been in and out of the headlines for health issues. But what many didn't know was that those last few months had been even harder than anyone guessed. The farewell concert looked like a celebration, and in many ways, it was. But now, with the truth unfolding, fans and friends are seeing that event in a very different light. It wasn't just a concert. It was a goodbye that had been carefully planned. Ozzy's wife, Sharon, had announced the show earlier in the year. She said he wanted to give fans the perfect farewell. But even she probably didn't expect how close to the end they were. It turns out Ozzy had been quietly preparing for his passing for a long time. Parkinson's disease is a neurological illness that weakens muscle control. It starts with shaking, but can get worse over time. People with Parkinson's often walk slowly, have speech issues, and struggle with balance. They can't cough properly or swallow easily. Even though Parkinson's itself doesn't directly take life, the complications from it can be fatal, like lung infections and choking. Ozzy first revealed his diagnosis in January of 2020. Over the next few years, he had several surgeries to fix damage from a nasty fall in 2019. One surgery, he later said, nearly left him crippled. By 2023, he was done with touring. Still, he wanted to go out on his terms. In an interview with Rolling Stone, he said, "If I can't continue doing shows regularly, I just want to be well enough to do one show where I can say, 'Hi guys, thanks so much for my life.' That's what I'm working towards, and if I drop lifeless at the end of it, I'll pass on a happy man." He meant it. The farewell concert was Ozzy's dream and possibly his way of making peace. From the outside, he looked fragile but joyful. The performance was shorter than usual. He remained seated, yet he gave it everything he had. Pantera frontman Phil Anselmo, who shared the stage that night, later said, "We'd all be different people without Ozzy and Black Sabbath. That's the truth." After the show, there were whispers and online speculation about whether this had been a one-off performance or something more final. Then came a sudden storm of rumors. Just days before Ozzy's passing, his daughter Kelly took to Instagram to shut down a strange story making the rounds. Some people were claiming that Ozzy and Sharon had made a secret agreement, a so-called assisted self-harm pact. "Stop making articles or posts about how you think my parents are having a self-harm pact," Kelly wrote. She blamed it on something her mom had said to get attention one time. She was referring to a shocking interview Sharon gave in 2007, where she said she and Ozzy had agreed to travel to Switzerland for an assisted self-harm if they were ever diagnosed with brain conditions like Alzheimer's. "We believe 100% in assisted self-harm," Sharon had told the Mirror. "It's a final gift of love to our kids." They had even gathered the children around the kitchen table to tell them. Sharon said, "Ozzy and I have asked our lawyers to make the appropriate arrangements. Back then, people thought she was just being dramatic. But now, with Ozzy's passing and no clear cause revealed, old words have taken on new meaning. Was it Parkinson's that caused his passing? Or was it a choice made in private, away from the flashing lights and the stage? The family has not confirmed any of these theories, and Kelly's Instagram post suggests they want such stories to stop. But it hasn't kept the questions from growing. Despite all the rumors, the tributes that poured in after Ozzy's passing reminded the world of what he meant, not just as a performer, but as a symbol. Tony Iommi, Ozzy's longtime bandmate and friend, said he couldn't really find the words, and that they had lost their brother. Geezer Butler said simply, "Goodbye, dear friend. Thanks for all those years. We had some great fun. 4 kids from Aston, who'd have thought?" The message hit hard. 4 boys from a working-class neighborhood had changed the music world forever. And now, one of them is gone. Elton John called Ozzy a dear friend and a huge trailblazer. Metallica, Green Day's Billie Joe Armstrong, Rod Stewart, Brian May from Queen, and countless others posted their goodbyes. Youngblood, who had sung Changes with Ozzy at the farewell concert, shared his sadness. "I didn't think you would leave so soon." It wasn't just musicians who mourned. Millions of fans, from teenagers discovering Black Sabbath on streaming apps to older rockers who grew up spinning vinyl in their bedrooms, all shared their heartbreak. Social media exploded with memories, videos, and teary tributes. Ozzy had become more than just a rock star. He was a character, a symbol of rebellion, a misunderstood genius. His voice had once terrified parents and thrilled teens. His pattern was wild, sometimes dark, but his love for his fans had always been real. Now, with new questions emerging and the silence that follows his final bow, many are asking, did we miss the signs? Did Ozzy Osbourne write the last chapter of his life in a way that only he could? One thing is certain, the story isn't over. The private battles Ozzy fought before his last breath. When news of Ozzy Osbourne's passing spread around the world, it felt like the end of an era. But now, new information is shining a light on the painful road he walked in private before his final days, a road many didn't see. These behind-the-scenes details are now changing how fans are thinking about his passing. One of the biggest surprises was just how sick Ozzy had become, even before his last performance. People knew he had Parkinson's, but what they didn't know was that his body had been falling apart for years. He went through a number of surgeries that didn't help. In fact, one of those surgeries went so badly, he said it made things worse. His words were chilling. "It left me crippled." That wasn't just an offhand comment. It was a sign that his condition was far more serious than people realized. This new look at Ozzy's health paints a much darker picture. He was dealing with a body that had been through too many injuries, falls, infections, and nonstop pain. The truth is, by the time he got on that stage for his farewell show, he was already saying goodbye in more ways than one. Many now believe his final appearance was less about music and more about letting go. There's one quote from him in 2023 that hits even harder now. He said, "At first I was angry at the world, but now I think maybe I just have to accept it." Looking back, it sounds like he had already made peace with what was coming. He wasn't just talking about retirement, he was talking about the end. Ozzy had always been a fighter, but these new details show that he knew the fight was almost over. What's truly heartbreaking is how much he hid behind the spotlight. Even though he was in pain, he kept smiling. Even though his body was failing, he kept singing. Those close to the Osbourne family say Ozzy's condition has become more dangerous than ever. They believe it wasn't just Parkinson's that caused his passing. Other health problems were building up too, like breathing troubles, nerve damage, and constant infections. One small problem could have become life-threatening fast. New signs now suggest that this might be exactly what happened. Doctors say that when Parkinson's gets worse, it can affect the lungs. If the throat muscles become weak, even a simple cold can turn fatal. And Ozzy had already battled pneumonia before. Now some suspect he may have picked up another infection, one his body couldn't fight off anymore. He once joked, "I should have passed on 1,000 times." That line feels very different now. It's no longer funny. It sounds like a man who knew his time was running out. Behind the scenes, it wasn't just sickness Ozzy had to deal with. His past demons never fully went away. In 1989, he once attacked his wife Sharon during a substance blackout. He was arrested, and the marriage nearly ended. Years later, she admitted she was terrified and almost walked away forever. But somehow, they stayed together. Looking at it now, that event shaped everything. Sharon became more than just a wife. She became his caretaker and his voice. She made hard decisions to protect him, including one that changed his whole career. On their wedding day, Sharon gave Ozzy a shocking gift: his contract. She had taken it from her father, Don Arden, who had been managing Ozzy's career. Instead of staying loyal to her dad, she signed Ozzy to a new record label and broke ties with her family forever. That choice cost her everything, but it gave Ozzy full control of his music. Looking back now, it feels like she knew he needed someone to fight for him, because one day he wouldn't be able to fight for himself. As Ozzy's health got worse, he slowly disappeared from public view. But when he did appear, it became clear he was struggling. He could barely walk. His voice was shaky. His hands trembled. Still, he never asked for pity. He had lived life on his terms, and he wanted to leave the same way. Even at his final concert, Ozzy didn't want anyone feeling sorry for him. He sat on a throne, held the mic with shaking hands, and gave it everything he had left. And when the crowd roared, you could see a little spark return to his tired eyes. Now, new details from backstage show just how special that night was. Queen guitarist Brian May said he shared a quiet moment with Ozzy after the show, just a few soft words. That short chat now feels like a final goodbye. Another musician called it the end of a giant. And that's the truth. Ozzy wasn't just a rock star. He was a giant in a world that doesn't make them like that anymore. As more stories come out, fans are realizing how much he had to hide to keep going. The man who once bit the head off a bat had become a quiet warrior, pushing through pain most people will never understand. But this wasn't about fame anymore. It was about finishing his story on his terms. Some fans say his passing feels like the end of heavy metal itself. As one person posted online, when Ozzy passed, a piece of music history passed with him. That's how powerful his legacy was. Even though his body gave out, his spirit didn't. And now, these private stories show a side of Ozzy few people ever saw, a man who hurt, who forgave, who loved deeply, and who kept going until the very last breath. So yes, Ozzy Osbourne is gone, but the new details now coming out about his final days don't just explain how he passed, they reveal who he was. And that changes everything. The shocking post. So far, we've uncovered how Ozzy fought through pain and disease, but now the picture of his passing is becoming clearer and far more emotional. The first revelation comes from the timing itself. Ozzy Osbourne passed away on July 22nd, just 17 days after his final live appearance. Then there's the post that stunned everyone. Only 2 days before his passing, Ozzy shared an image with the words, "Back to the beginning." No caption, no comments, just silence. At first, fans thought it was just another post from his early days, but now it feels like a deeply personal sign, maybe even his final message to the world. It's a moment that gives chills when viewed through this new lens. Another piece of the puzzle is where he passed on. In 2023, Ozzy and Sharon left Los Angeles and moved back to a quiet village in Buckinghamshire, England. At the time, it seemed like a decision to retire somewhere peaceful. But after his passing, sources close to the family revealed that the move wasn't just for comfort, it was for closure. He wanted to be home, not in a hospital, not under bright lights, but with his family, in peace. Fans always imagined Ozzy as the Prince of Darkness, living fast until the very end. But the truth is much softer. Even Jason Momoa, who hosted Ozzy's farewell concert, said the night felt like a pinch-me moment. Looking back, that comment hits differently. It wasn't just excitement, it was awe. Jason likely sensed what many fans didn't, that Ozzy was leaving more than just the stage. He was leaving the world soon after. There's also the mystery behind the cause of passing. The family's official statement did not reveal what exactly ended Ozzy's life. They simply asked for privacy. But considering his long list of health struggles, Parkinson's disease, spinal surgeries, respiratory problems, and infections, it's now understood that his body was reaching its limit. The silence in the announcement now feels more like a respectful pause than a cover-up. Maybe they wanted to keep the focus on his life, not the exact way he left it. Let's not forget the crashes that left lasting damage. After his serious fall in 2019, doctors had to operate on his spine several times. Ozzy himself admitted the surgeries didn't go as planned. Add that to the bike crash in 2003, and you start to see just how much physical trauma his body had endured over the years. These weren't just setbacks. They were signs that his body was giving out. And yet, he still showed up on stage in 2025. Knowing all this now, that last performance looks even more like an act of bravery. He could have stayed home. He could have avoided the spotlight completely. But instead, Ozzy stood in front of a massive crowd, knowing full well it might be the last time. Digging deeper, there's a new appreciation for his final battles. Ozzy spent years trying stem cell therapy, intense rehab sessions, nerve treatments, and even healing. At one point, he described himself as a test subject for medical science. But after all those attempts, he finally said enough. That decision tells us something. He wasn't giving up. He was choosing peace. That choice also explains why he stopped appearing at public events and award shows, even when fans begged for a last sighting. Nowhere is this clearer than in his daughter Kelly's words. Just before his passing, she strongly denied rumors that Ozzy and Sharon had made any sort of self-harm pact. She described her father as full of life and fighting spirit. But after his passing, she opened up about the crushing weight of losing her best friend. That shift from strong denial to deep grief paints a very human picture of a family trying to stay strong. What we do know is this: his final days were shaped by love, music, and private strength, not just pain and illness. Those days were carefully crafted. Sources close to the family now say that Ozzy spent his final weeks planning what songs would be played at his memorial and what kind of tribute he wanted. It was deeply intentional. That's the part no one expected. What's most surprising in all these new details is how carefully he shaped his end. Ozzy Osbourne's quiet goodbye. One of the most telling details came from his silence. Ozzy had always been loud, whether through his music or his bold interviews. But in the final months of his life, he grew noticeably quiet. No tweets, no interviews, no footage from his home. Many thought it was due to illness, but now we understand it was deliberate. Ozzy was pulling back from the noise. He was preparing. Sharon Osbourne once described him as tired of fighting, but not weak. That one line hits harder now than ever before. He didn't surrender. He just knew when it was time to stop. Looking at that now, it's clear he had already accepted the end long before anyone else did. One small but powerful detail stands out: the removal of all tour equipment from their home in Buckinghamshire in early July. A moving truck was spotted carrying out amplifiers and lighting gear. At the time, fans assumed it meant he was changing homes again. But a close friend of the family later confirmed the truth. Ozzy had packed up his stage for good. It was his way of letting go. Even Ozzy's beloved pets were reportedly moved to another residence weeks before his passing. As strange as it sounds, those who knew him well said he didn't want his dogs around when he was at his weakest. That shows a side of Ozzy the public rarely saw, a man of deep love and quiet pride. He wanted to protect everyone, even his animals, from the sadness of goodbye. The small details keep adding up. In mid-June, he had all his old stage costumes taken out of storage. Family members thought he wanted to do a photo shoot. Instead, he spent a day quietly looking through them, touching the fabrics, holding the jackets. He just sat with the memories. That silent reflection tells a story louder than words ever could. Then there's his longtime assistant, Rob. Rob had worked with Ozzy since the early 90s. In an emotional message shared days after his passing, Rob said, "He knew it was time, but he never stopped being Ozzy." That message confirms what fans suspected but didn't want to believe. Ozzy was aware of how close the end was, and he chose to face it with dignity. There's also the matter of his final meal, which Sharon later revealed in a quiet moment with family friends. It wasn't anything fancy, just mashed potatoes, roast chicken, and apple pie, his favorites. No grand feast, no last hurrah, just comfort food. It sounds simple, but in many ways, that's the most Ozzy thing of all. Stripped of fame and fortune, he wanted warmth. Reports now say that in his final 48 hours, he asked not to be filmed or photographed. He even told nurses to turn around if he got emotional. It was important to him that people didn't remember his pain, but his strength. That one request changes the tone of everything. It was a man in full control of his legacy. But perhaps the most heartbreaking new detail involves his grandchildren. Sharon shared privately with friends that Ozzy recorded short video messages for each of them to be played on their birthdays. He didn't want to leave without saying something special to each one. He planned those messages weeks in advance, choosing his words carefully. This was Ozzy as a grandfather, not a rock icon, and it's the side of him that now leaves fans in tears. Now it feels like the last page of a book that shaped generations. It's hard to ignore how much thought he put into this exit. The decision to pull out of every future award show, the quiet sale of a few remaining music rights, the closing of his private recording studio. None of these things were random. Ozzy Osbourne was putting his affairs in order, not out of fear, but out of respect for those he loved. In his final week, he asked Sharon to play 2 songs every morning, Changes by Black Sabbath and Dreamer from his solo career. He said they reminded him of who he was and who he became. Listening to those lyrics now, it's as if he was singing his goodbye in advance. He had given the world all the noise it could handle during his life. He didn't want his passing to be another headline. Even the Osbourne family reality show, once such a big part of their image, was never brought back despite fan demands. Now we know why. Ozzy didn't want his final chapter to be broadcast. He wanted it private, sacred, and his alone. A final thought that's now coming to light. The day before he passed, he reportedly requested to be wheeled into his garden. He sat under the trees, watched the sky, and asked for silence.